Hello, everybody. Please take your seats. How is everybody? We good? Thank you for coming. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here. People, just a second to come in. So I am the chair for the third session, final session of the day, the future of food systems. My name is Sam Cass. I'm a partner at a firm called Acre. We invest in early stage startups focused on climate change, environmental health, human health, and the food system. I formerly helped lead food policy in the Obama administration and was also their chef. So I'm a recovering chef, but only cook for my 6 and 4-year-old now. But I'm really very much excited to talk about the future of food. And in the previous sessions, I know we've talked about failures, lessons learned from that, how we start to scale up some of these innovations. But in this session, we're really going to look to the future and trying to figure out where we need to head. And it's a critical conversation given the future that our system faces. I've been doing these dinners called the Last Supper, where there are menus full of ingredients that our kids and grandkids will likely not have because of climate. And when I did the first one at COP15, and each year the list grows. And on this list are things like coffee, wine, and chocolate. So if you didn't care about climate, now you do. And we're seeing some profound disruptions. By 2050, there's not a model in the world that shows coffee production, which right now is entirely smallholder farmers within about 10 degrees of the equator, able to produce coffee in those regions. It goes to shellfish and crustaceans. In the last 5 years, we've lost 80% of snow crabs. 9 billion snow crabs gone in 5 years in the Pacific Northwest. Next year, they don't know whether there'll be literally any crabs left. The list keeps, this year we lost 95% of the Georgia peaches. So what seems like far out conversations actually need to be accelerated because the kind of future of the climate impacts are right now. When I first started these, it was like, yeah, kids and grandkids, mostly grandkids. And then it was sort of kids. And the reality is many of these things will start to really play out in our lifetimes. And so as we look to these solutions, so there's sort of 3 big imperatives that we should be taking into consideration. The first is we have to dramatically lessen the impact of the systems I'm sure many people have talked about and everybody knows of the food and agricultural system on the environment. Number 2 driver of emissions, 70% of the world's water. Number 1 driver of biodiversity loss and deforestation. So we have to find innovations and tools that are going to help us lessen the impact. Second, I think will shape our conversation is adaptation and resilience. We're entering an age of deep volatility and emerging from one of the most stable climate, basically scientists can observe in the human record for the last 100 years. We've had bountiful resources and complete stability. And now we will enter an age of minimal resources and extreme volatility. And our system is just not designed for that. So as we look to the future, we have to be thinking about how do we build resilience and diversity into our system. But third, and this is what gets me very excited, particularly as an investor, I fundamentally believe that food and agricultural systems are the only system on the planet that can sequester enough carbon to really shape the global footprint curve in the time horizon that the science says we have. And there's a lot of exciting, interesting things being developed, carbon capture and many other magical things. But there's no way that tech scales quick enough and cheap enough with the time that we have. Just no way. And food and agriculture can sequester. You have over 1,300 billion tons of carbon used to be in our soils. That's 80 years of annual emissions right now. And I think it's the only system that can scale with the right tools and innovations to actually make a difference. So I am extremely excited about many of the things that I'm seeing and extremely excited to have this conversation here today with some of the leading minds in the space. So with that, I'm going to welcome our distinguished panel. Brent Loken, for the global food scientist, lead scientist for WWF. Please come up yeah. I'll take the first one. So you guys, take the next. You take that first one right there. Yeah. Shane Fertig, who's the senior advisor to the president of the Good Food Institute. And Mario Herrero, director of food systems and global change at Cornell. Please welcome our friends to the stage. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Been a while.
Hi.
First of all, thank you all for your work. You guys have done just incredible work in such an important moment. Brent, you recently released a publication titled "Solving the Great Food Puzzle: The Right Innovation, Right Impact, Right Place." I'd say it's a really significant contribution. Can you tell us, what are the key insights and takeaways from that piece of work? What are the trends and places we should really be focusing on, from your opinion?
Sure. So the Solving the Great Food Puzzle series of reports is a series of reports that we started 2 years ago. And the idea behind these was the notion that we have to, like at the global level, I think we have a pretty good sense in terms of what's going on. Eat Lancet 1.0, global commissions, global emissions. But in terms of how food system transformation plays out at the national level, I think we have a much less of an understanding. So what does food system transformation look like in the US versus Brazil versus Kenya versus Indonesia versus India versus all these local contexts? What are the ecological, the social, the political, all those different dynamics, and how do they play out, and how does that shape food system transformation? So what motivated this series was to really dig down and say, let's start to understand this puzzle. Every single country is a piece of this puzzle, and we have to start putting it together. So this is the second report in that series, and what motivated this was really answering this question: what is the future of food? And initially what we wanted to do was we wanted to look at this, horizon scanning. What is on the horizon? What are the top tech innovations that will solve the, food crisis that you did talk about? But very quickly we started to realize, and this ethic, this idea that we had of really downscaling it, localized, context specific, we realized that once we started to get into innovation, it starts to break down, because innovation itself is so context specific. Mm-hmm. That we couldn't say it's always tech, it's always this, it's always that. And that really the innovation that is going to have the most impact depends on the local conditions and what problem you're actually trying to solve. So we backed up from this report where we were doing the top 10 innovations that will transform food systems, and we said, can we develop a framework that gets us thinking about the local context and how innovation plays out at the local level? So we looked at the right innovation, getting away from only looking at innovation as being, tech solutions. Innovations can be social, they can be political, yep. They can be economic. So there's many different types of innovations. So really thinking much more broadly about that. So what is the right innovation, and can we pair the right innovation with the right lever to have the most impact in the shortest time possible? So that was step one. Step two was the right impact. Because often when we think of innovation, we're thinking about innovation as having this disruptive impact. We want to come in and transform something. But in many parts of the world, the food system is doing just fine. That actually we don't need a huge disruptive impact. You need a small impact, you need a tweak to that system, and then you need to pair that tweak with a larger social innovation to have the most impact. So then what is the right impact depending on the place? And then the last step is, what is the right place? So really understanding the context of that. And once you get into the right innovation with the right impact in the right place, we feel that using this, you will have a better sense of being able to identify the right innovation and making sure that you're going to have the type of impact that you want, because we've also seen many instances where we've deployed an innovation and it has had a negative impact. Mm-hmm. Or we've dumped a lot of money into an innovation and we wasted 5 years thinking, why didn't this tech innovation work in this place? Well, maybe you shouldn't have deployed a tech innovation. Maybe it should have been a social innovation instead. So that's where we're going with this. That's the motivation. It's the first step. Where we'd like to go with it in the future is to develop some sort of decision-making playbook that we could hand to people. So they say, if I want to solve problem X in country Y, Can you take them through a series of questions that they can then say, yes, this is an innovation that will work, that seems to have the most impact, or it won't. And that's the next series that we would like to.
Just a quick follow-up. First of all, I think it's absolutely right and so spot on in terms of, and by the way, Brazil's a big place. So what's happening in the north is very different than what's happening in the south. So it actually starts to play out even on a more granular level than just the country. But I think starting with that level is absolutely critical. And it's not, how do you think about different like crops and how they play out differently in the world? Because a solution for rice in the US is going to be very different than in Indonesia. And so are you starting to get granular, like able to understand different crops or commodities in different marketplaces?
I think as a next step, and as we start to play this out and we break it down into the next level of now we've got this framework, and then we start to look at how this framework plays out in different countries, then we'll be able to get down to that granular, level. And that's really the motivation where we would like to take this. One of the things that we found with writing this report is there's such little evidence to actually support innovation. So one of the things that we have to do is really develop the information and the evidence to really be able to support and have faith that the innovation that we want to implement is going to have the impact that we actually want. And we have to do that quickly.
Yeah. Shayna, your expertise is really focused in alternative proteins, a much discussed topic with many strong opinions on various sides. How are these innovations starting to shape your thinking on what the future really looks like? And, what do you believe is actually groundbreaking here? Because I think there's some things that, sound transformational, but actually may not get very far, and other things that may not be quite as good as we think they are. Whole new wave, and I'm on the board of one company who's in this space, whole new wave of sort of next generation products coming. So tell us your vision of where you think this space is headed.
So I'll start with a definition of alternative proteins. So these are products that are intended to mimic the taste, texture, and nutritional value of conventional animal products, but with fewer of the external costs, and made using plants or fermentation or cellular agriculture. And the idea here is really to achieve taste and price parity with conventional animal products. So aiming to taste the same or better than what they're replacing and cost the same or less. And the reason that's really important is because we know that consistently consumers will vote on taste and price to make their food choices. It's not sustainability that's coming to the top. It's not health. It's consistently taste and price. And right now, most of the products that you may have seen on the market, the initial alternative protein products, these are largely not achieving both taste and price parity. So that's why we're not seeing a massive adoption right now. It's really early adopters that are willing to sacrifice on taste and or on price because they maybe especially care about the environment or animal welfare. And really, until we achieve taste and price parity, we're not going to be able to reach the mass market consumer. But the industry is really in its infancy, and there's a lot of likelihood that we will be able to achieve this. Oh, thank you. Likelihood that we will be able to achieve this taste and price parity, and when that happens, it'll be a lot easier for the average consumer to make the choice to buy an alternative protein product, whether it's because they care about the environment or their health, or simply because it's a new food trend that they want to try. And I think one thing that's interesting about alternative proteins is they analogize really well to electric vehicles and renewable energy in a lot of ways. So just in the same way that there are campaigns for energy efficiency and more walkable cities and reduced meat consumption, we're unlikely to convince the majority of the world population to drive less, to consume less energy and less meat. And what's really important here is recognizing that meat consumption is expected to increase significantly. The lowest end of the projection is 60% more animal agriculture by the year 2050. And most estimates hover around doubling. So just as we're changing the way that energy is produced, the way that vehicles are powered, I think so too should we change the way that meat is made. And I think just one last point here is that it's not a silver bullet. There are many other amazing food innovations that have been talked about today and that haven't been mentioned today that are certainly worth pursuing. But I think alternative proteins are an important and critical part of that menu of solutions, if you will.
I think it's good to remind people the trajectory of meat consumption globally, because I think that alternative proteins get a lot of attention, and I think we think that maybe there's a shift happening here, but really right now it's not happening. Do you have a sense of what part of the spectrum is going to get to price? Because I totally agree with you. People cannot pay more, like very small percentage of society can afford to pay more. Do you have a sense of where what part is going to get there fastest? And the second part is, you said their taste and price for sure, but health is actually up there. And there's been some pretty robust debates in this sector around the nutritional value of many of these products. What do you see happening there? Because once you check taste and price, health actually drives a lot of behavior. So where do you see the sector heading there?
Yeah, good question. So on the first one, I think likely plant-based and fermentation-derived proteins are likely to reach price parity first, just given that they've had a head start. I mean, cultivated meat has only just entered the U.S. market as of a few months ago, and only in a few restaurants. So I think there's a little bit of a lag there, and more learnings and research that needs to be done to reach price parity versus plant-based options. Fermentation-derived proteins have had a little bit more of a head start. So I think my opinion is that they're likely to achieve price parity likely quicker. And then on the second question on health, I think it's important to separate plant-based and cultivated meat when we're talking about this, because cultivated meat is animal meat. The nutrition is the same. And there's even ways that there's potential to improve nutrition of cultivated meat to make it better than traditional animal meat. Plant-based meat, what's already on the market, is I think where more of the debate is this healthier than what it's replacing? And I think what's important to remember here is just that, what is it replacing? Is an Impossible Burger healthier than a quinoa salad bowl? No, likely not. I think though, when you think about what people would be eating instead, or what the intention of what people would be eating instead is, right now plant-based meat does have nutritional benefits over conventional meat, matches in protein, higher fiber, less saturated fat. So it is a marginally healthier option if someone was going to choose a standard hamburger instead. But of course, for people that are already choosing more whole foods, plant-based diets, certainly these products are not intended to necessarily be part of that diet. These people are already having a more sustainable diet.
There are definitely some out there that would take issue on the health claim, but we'll let that one go for now.
We can chat after.
Mario, so your work, I think your mic should work, but we'll see. You're prepared.
Hello?
If not, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think you're good.
Great.
Your work involves a very comprehensive approach to looking at food systems. Can you share Cornell's understanding and vision for how these complex networks influence ultimately how we feed ourselves, and some of the work you're doing at Cornell?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I think that we are a food systems community. I wouldn't class it as the Cornell approach, because it's a really insurmountable problem. And we need the Jesses, we need the Brents, we need the Raviks, we need everybody here to really bring their expertise and really contribute. The food system is incredibly complex. We live in a really complex and less kind world than before. So it's really getting very difficult to really think of what are the real solutions for the world. Part of the problem is that anything that we try to do comes with tremendous perverse incentives or unintended consequences. And we need to really go beyond just looking at the kind of obvious impacts, and really start planning and thinking about, well, what are potential repercussions down the line? It's just something that it's fundamental. And sometimes we actually say, well, yeah, things are not being adopted fast enough. Well, it's for a good reason, and at the end of the day, we need to really try to understand and be as systemic as possible in doing our assessments of how a technology in any part of the food system could work. We're talking about from production all the way to consumption and all the parts in between, dealing with processing, dealing with food environments, etc. So there's plenty of entry points, which is a good thing. But at the same time, we really need to think this much more carefully in terms of the more nuanced responses that can have impacts in other parts of the food system. That's also part of the problem, you know, that everything's connected and there's repercussions. Three things that are not optional, but that need to be by design part of the plan are nutrition, equity, and the environment. These three things, environment, we've been paying a lot of attention, but we have not paid enough attention to nutrition. You know, the statistics that Jess keeps presenting don't seem to go down fast enough. And, you know, that's worrying. We are not really reaching proportions. Also, we're not reaching proportions of consumers that need to be better served by our actions. A second part is that, you know, the food system is it's changing dynamically so much. And then we need to really start planning, not only for now, but for the future, knowing the adoption lags that we have. You know, many of the systems, many even of the problems will have changed by the time that we deploy some of these alternative options. And it's really important that we understand a lot better that process of change. Just put it this way: we tend to do projections to 2100 or 2050 or 2100. If you take the time from now to 2100, it's exactly the same amount of time than from the Second World War to now. Just imagine the amount of innovation that occurred during that period. Yes, and we created heaps of deforestation and all these perverse incentives that we are occurring. But, you know, there were really, really important things, game changes that will happen. And in many discussions, we take technological change as the current projections of technological change are super tame, you know, partly because we don't know what's coming up, what is the realistic set of innovations that are really going to be the breakthroughs of in the food system. But again, you know, we need to construct a world that is ready for this. We need to work with policies that are actually going to support this very radical changes, because the current policy environment is really not ready for this kind of transformation that we are proposing here. So, you know, we need to be a little bit more intentional about these design elements and, for things to work.
Couldn't agree with that more. So I'm going to go somewhat of a semi-lightning round, and then open it up for questions. And so if you have a question, please come down to either microphone. Please ask questions. Please ask the hard questions, especially since I'm the moderator and not a panelist, so ask the really tough ones. So back to a theme for the day: the big bets on innovations. Considering these trends, considering the challenges that we are facing, you know, where would you put your real bet on, you know, an innovation or two, but maybe the one you think right now is the most ready to scale, and what is the kind of resource that will be needed to scale that innovation down the line?
Well, I'm going to be I mean, just building on what I said initially, I don't know. Because it's so context specific and it's so place based, right? So the big bet in a place like
so give us a context specific one.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you could even think of like plant-based meats. You know, plant-based meats. You raised some really good points, and I think that was really the big bet, that a lot of people were saying this was going to have an impact. But I just heard in the UK that plant-based meat, you know, consumption is actually going down. Why is that happening? You know what was in place, or was it the wrong innovation in the wrong place at the wrong time, or something to that effect? So what are the big bets? You know, I would say it is so context specific. I don't know, but what we need to think when we're thinking about innovation is we need to move beyond a specific innovation like a tech innovation. We need to start looking at social movements. We need to start looking at political movements. We need to start looking at economic movements. And we need to start looking at in what places are those innovations going to be able to make the best bet. And in some places, we don't actually need tech innovations. We just need a social innovation to actually take off, whether it's a youth movement or some other social innovation. And those are going to have the big bets. You know, I could say, if you want me to place a big bet in a place like Kenya, a place where there's a bunch of smallholder farmers, the innovation that is going to have the most impact in that particular context would be investing in smallholder farmers and securing land rights for those farmers. That will have the most impact in the shortest amount of time in that particular context, right?
Love it.
So I'll very quickly just respond to what you said. Yes, I mean, plant-based meat is declining in some markets, and I think it's precisely because of not tasting good enough and still being too expensive. So in some cases, I would say yes, it was not the right time necessarily to launch these products. So thinking about your question and the list that the students had shared earlier, I think one of the ones that I'm most excited about from that list was the methane inhibiting feed additives. I think there's a lot of promise with these. I think there's also some limitations given that most of these have been tested in feedlots, and most cows emit the most methane when grazing. But I think there is a lot of promise there. I think one thing that is important, though, is that these types of solutions are addressing the amount of methane per animal, but not the number of animals that are going to need to be growing to match the increasing demand for animal agriculture I was talking about. So I think this is an area where there's a lot of there's a complementary solution in the form of alternative proteins being able to fill some of that gap, but also these, for example, methane inhibiting feed additives to be able to address the methane from the animals that are still going to be needed.
Yeah, let me complement what the others have said. You know, what we really need is, I don't believe in silver bullets, and there's very few. And what we need is, you know, a suite of innovations that will have their own context and everything. You know, we don't really have time to be prissy about choosing some. What we need is to create an innovation ecosystem that allows us to continuously innovate, to continuously, you know, search for solutions, fail fast, and move on to the next thing. What we need is many options here that will be suited for different contexts and so on. And this is central. It's central to the thinking. You know, I think that we need to move. You know, we had a lovely thing with Andy on which are the best bets, but in reality, it's not thinking about best bets. It's really thinking about all these things will need to play a part in different parts of the world, in different contexts, etc. At different times. You know, maybe they're not ready now, but in 5 years there will be something, and we need to keep the cycle moving and moving. I think that that's essential.
And it sounds daunting, like how do we solve this puzzle and how do we put it together? But we can do it. And like you said at the very start, like it takes all of us to try and figure out what our parts are and what our pieces are. And you know how we're also looking at it is that innovations will actually work, you know, in a particular context. So we can actually group countries by food system types, by characteristics, by social, political, economic, environmental characteristics, and then the innovation. And then we can look at innovations through that lens instead of country specific or region specific.
I totally agree. And also, you know, they go beyond technology. There's super exciting things like the true cost and true value of food approaches, for example. We need to find ways and test this kind of things, how they will work. How can we start inserting them in the food system? Policy innovations like repurposing of subsidies. You know, for many, it's a crazy idea. But just imagine if that flew. You know, if we could transfer some of the taxes to another part of the food system, perhaps to subsidize consumers to get healthier food or something like that. You know, we need to keep the creativity flowing to find solutions for this really tough problem.
We're running short on time. Does anybody have any question? Please come to the mic. Oh, for this. Okay, good. We got time.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laiz Miachon. It's a pleasure to be here. My question is, today we heard a lot about innovation and the need to include young people and those who have been left behind. In that spirit, who is one organization and one individual that each of you look forward to for having an impact into the future? Who should we watch out for in this space? Thank you.
We should watch out for Laís Machon.
I think there's a lot of really interesting work in alternative proteins coming out of countries outside the US and Europe, where traditionally a lot of this has been focused. So I think looking to innovators in countries in South America and in Asia and in Africa that are doing really exciting work on alternative proteins. One organization I'll just shout out is called Essential. They're making fermentation-derived products to help provide nutrition to people across Africa and Asia, and doing so in a more sustainable way. So I think there's a lot of other great initiatives out there, but that's just one I would shout out.
A shout out to our own organization, WWF. I'm continually inspired by the national level context, the food system transformation happening in individual national offices all over the world. It is impossible to keep up with everything going on, but it's so inspiring, the local context in terms that it's being driven. I also think it's global. It's like organizations like GAF, Global Alliance, Patty Fong, Ana Lape, who are funding and really supporting raising up the voices of smallholder farmers and people that don't necessarily have that. Last year at COP, they brought, I think it was 100 individuals to COP so that they could have a voice. And I think it's organizations like that we have to support, that are really trying to raise up the voices of the don't normally get heard. So,
I agree. Sir.
Hi, my name is Sarang Nerkar. I'm from India, and I have a startup and it's along the lines of this technological innovation with social innovation aspect. We developed a data platform and advisory platform in 2018. And since 2018 till today, we worked on this collaborative coalition-based deployment model for it, which was the social innovation. We just didn't know it was a social innovation. So we had to do that, and we are profitable today. But a lot of these things aren't sexy for traditional investors. So we had to bootstrap all of this, and that's a very difficult problem to solve. How do we try to get investment for this? Because the technology aspect is sexy for investors, but to make money out of it, you need to do the social aspect, which is maybe not so attractive. How do we tackle that?
I 100% agree. It seems like the foundations are really interested in the tech innovations, right? In those silver bullets. What can I invest my money in that will be able to scale? And I don't know if everything is actually scalable and should be scalable. And so I don't know, but we have to start influencing the funders to be able to do that. So it's working on the Bezos, the Rockefellers, and everybody else to be able to see past just the tech innovations and say it's also social innovations. I was in India a couple months ago. Some of the best food work in the world is happening in India. And it's the social, it's the political, it's the tech. And I think that, getting that word out and learning from the work that is happening in India could be a really like that North Star for other people that are trying to do food system transformation. So it's really inspiring.
Can I compliment that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I also see another side of the coin. In many cases, there's funds out there. And they're not being spent in the right things quickly enough. And one of the reasons is also because, the kind of roadmaps that are proposed for many of these interventions are not convincing enough, nor the financial stability of once you get the funds, well, how do you achieve sustainability in scaling that? So even with a one-off investment, you really need to, there has to be an enormous amount of due diligence in making the necessary financial plans and so on of how this is going to work in the meantime. For example, you take the Green Climate Fund, what they say is that many of the proposals are super naive of how it's going to work. And also, in many cases, the impacts are really probably oversold a little bit.
Yep.
So we need to create a little bit of a realistic idea of what the kinds of impacts might be as well.
Yes, sir.
You probably see that all the time.
Thanks very much. Fascinating set of perspectives on this panel. I wanted to pick up on the policy piece that you guys have been talking about. Pretty concise. I was listening to a panel on Monday of fund managers, and unprompted, they started talking about shifting agricultural subsidies. I was very surprised to hear that topic come up on that in that community. I'm curious whether any of you have seen kind of a mapping of potential influencers on agricultural policy, which we all are aware determines why the ag landscape and the food system looks the way it does today, and which potential influencers are part of that landscape, like fund managers who haven't historically been engaged, but might be very powerful. Have any of you seen an effort like that in the US, in Brazil, in India, in Indonesia, the other countries that Jess mentioned earlier today?
Maybe after 6 years in the White House, maybe I'll take this one. I think you have to be very careful to buy into the silver bullet ag subsidy, like the one innovation is going to solve everything. The reality is that there's some bad agricultural policy, for sure. Ethanol policy is a disaster on every level. Like, there's a bunch of bad subsidy policies. But if you got rid of a lot of that, the system would basically still look mostly the same, because you have an extremely mature economy built around those highly efficient, although externalizing of many of the implications of that system, but yet it's a very mature market. And so the idea, like, all of that theory was Michael Pollan's direct payment, critique, which no longer exists. It's been shifted into crop insurance. It distorts to a certain extent. And that should absolutely be improved and shifted towards conservation and climate smart regenerative, incentives, which would have an impact. But I'm going to tell you, we're still going to grow an extraordinary amount of corn. We're still going to grow an extraordinary amount of soy, especially if we're eating an extraordinary amount of meat. So we have to be very careful not to say that, if government would just get enlightened, this would all be fine. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. I also think we're growing food in lots of places. We've invested hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars into this system for growers who, many of them, are just barely getting by. We're losing like 16,000 farms a year. Or in the last 6 years, we lost a huge percentage of, just talking to Bill yesterday, 16,000 farms since he left in the end till he started in this administration. In the US, just in the US, forget about what's happening around the world. And so you have to be very careful about, some of the implications of a pretty dramatic shift. So there has to be smart policy. It has to be incentivizing better practices and better behaviors. But in the end, after being in that place for those years, you see the government has a very important role, and we definitely shape to a certain extent those policies. But ultimately, it's a private sector endeavor between people who are producing food and those who are consuming it. And the government can't actually dictate what ends up on that plate. It is way more complicated, to your point, in terms of ultimately what influences what we actually end up eating. And so it's a part of it, but I just resist the notion that somehow if we could just change that subsidy policy, everybody would be fine.
It's a silver bullet.
Yeah. So it's nuanced and it's hardcore political. So if you want to know, it's not just about influencers, it's about politics and it's about votes. So until we start engaging in politics and vote, getting most people to care about food policy, I promise you those policies aren't going to change. Right now, you have a lot of people with a vested interest. They really care. Voters do not. And until that shifts, I promise you they're going to win. If that shifts, I promise you we will win. But right now, nobody votes on this issue, and that's on us. We haven't created a real movement there. Last question, sir.
Cool. Thank you so much. My name is Max. I work here at the Climate School. So I had a question related specifically, following on your last point, about alternative proteins, and not my field, so forgive this is naive, but my sense in these kind of discussions is that when we're talking about shifting the diets of people in the global north, it's typically framed in terms of like, if there's a sufficiently convincing, affordable, attractive substitute to using meats, that people will switch over to that en masse. And in terms of reducing consumption of meat, that is the best way of achieving that. And it seems to me that that framing elides the fact that, in my opinion, most of the most interesting, actually existing, plant-based or mostly plant-based cuisines don't necessarily rely on having a big hunk of protein, right?
Mhm.
And so I guess I'm curious, just in terms of efforts to shift, consumer habits in the global north, what is there besides just trying to make better Beyond Burgers, right? Is there stuff that's a little more looking toward these, other traditions of actually existing plant-based diets?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of efforts out there that are around diversifying diets beyond just Beyond Burgers, no pun intended. I would say this effort is rooted in the fact that consumers largely are hard to change and have their preferences in diet, specifically in the global north. And we're trying to meet consumers where they're at. But certainly there are efforts around the world focused on diversifying diets away from meat or meat-like products with things like lentils and pulses and legumes. And that's certainly an important effort that should exist alongside alternative proteins. I don't think it's an either or discussion. I think it's a both. And also different things will appeal to different people. People who like a hunk of steak on their plate might be very different than someone who would like lentils for dinner. So I would say that both avenues need to be pursued and are valuable.
I want to make one quick point on the policy. I think I know we're over, so this will be very quick. To this person's policy, one positive thing moving forward, and to end it on this, is that at COP28, this is going to be the food COP. There's very strong signals coming down that food is going to be highlighted. The leaders' declaration is extremely good, and it mentions food systems again and again and again, and the fact that we will not be able to tackle climate change without addressing food systems. This is the first time we can have it. If we can get 100 countries to sign up to that, it will send a strong signal from top that food systems are on the table and they need to be fixed, and I think that's going to be hopefully a positive step that we can make that change this year. So
I agree. Let's see how we do there.
let's see how we do that.
Please thank my panelists. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you so much. So it is with my great honor and privilege to invite an old friend, Geeta Sethi, who is your advisor and global lead for food systems at the World Bank. Having done some work over the years with the World Bank, I will tell you it is a big, complicated, highly political, challenging place to get a lot of stuff done. And this woman is a one-woman army who's been fighting the good fight for many, many, many years to try to move the needle forward in countries around the world. So please welcome Geeta.
Thank you so much, Sam. This is a very tough act to follow with Sam and the panelists, but let me give it a try. First, what an amazing pleasure. I'm absolutely delighted, honored, and privileged to be here. So thank you for having me. I'm supposed to close and give a sense of what's happening on food systems, particularly given that we have the COP, we just closed the G20, et cetera, et cetera. So let me start with some interesting facts. We've been talking about how hot the planet is, and hottest July, and hottest June, and hottest May, and hottest this, and hottest that. We've had droughts, floods. We are as hot. We are today as hot as we were 125,000 years ago. Agriculture was born 10,000 years ago, which effectively means today we are in uncharted territories. So I think a lot of the discussions that we heard and sort of, how do we move forward, I think is exactly reflecting that, but also a great opportunity. With that, I think the next is no longer can the agriculture and food be a single business enterprise. The 21st century farming, the 21st century farmer has to have at least 3 sources of revenue. One is, of course, food produced. The second is eco-service payments, given all the bankruptcy of the planet with the way we are producing, consuming, financing food. And I'm going to get to that because there was a very interesting policy financing question to the last panel. And the third is the renewables. And I think all 3 is then what is the kind of a food systems that we want to see going forward. We also know that the action has to be at the country level. Each country is unique. One got a glimpse of that as well in the discussions. So I want to highlight sort of what we say the 5 I's in terms of the enablers, and I'm going to unbundle later why each one of them is relevant. First is the incentives, and there was a question on the policy framework. You're exactly right. Today, the public support to agriculture and food is about 800 billion a year globally. 65% is distortionary vis-a-vis climate outcomes and health of people, the question that Sam had on terms of food and health. And the big push that many are trying to do on this is repurpose. And repurpose this support, not all of it. Let's just take 15% of this support and repurpose it in terms of, and someone said, who are the influencers? I don't know about the influencers, but I can tell you who are going to be the main custodians to make this shift happen, not because this is a happy moment, but because of fiscal crisis, is ministries of finance. And with even 15% of repurposing to what? We know there's a big gap between our poverty lines of $2.10 a day and the healthy plate of $5. Could we push the poverty lines that really moves from caloric sufficiency to nutrition sufficiency? And this disconnect or income support programs could be one way of doing it. Second is the eco-service payments. If these farmers are the guardians and are trying to do the right climate smart with technology and innovations happening so quickly, and these resources could be used. So incentives is one. The second is institutions in terms of just domestic, globally, in terms of really providing the right information, policies, and the winners and losers. Third is the I is the innovation part of it. Today, 0.34% on an average of ag GDP is spent on innovation nationally. Could we push it to at least 1%, which is then there is a lot of room for exactly the conversation the previous panel had, that where there can be an ecosystem service or ecosystem platform for these innovations to move forward. Third is information. Again, information in terms of managing the political economy. It's not going to be a win-win for all. But why did India's entire agricultural farm bills fail? They were brilliant. They were fantastic. They were all in the move in the right direction because there was no discussion with the central group, the farmers. Finally, the last is investments. And here, unlike energy transition, which has been able to grab private finance, food systems still hasn't. Climate finance, to date, $660 billion has gone to climate finance. Food and agriculture is about 28 billion, 4%. Emissions from the sector are 33%. At minimum, the climate finance going to the food sector should equate the emissions. Even if we leave 660 constant for the next 5 years, that's scale financing of over 200 billion a year. And we do know that to get the system transformed is 300 to 400 billion a year. In terms of the private finance, I think the big complaint that the financiers have is, where are the bankable projects? The risk profile is too high. Okay, what are the bankable projects? The 3 big emitters in the food sector that pick up 70% of emissions is rice, livestock, food loss and waste. Rice, low emission rice, that's a $20 billion investment right there. So what is the risk factor where we can get public finance, philanthropy, and development finance to come in? We have these blueprints now. They're ready to roll. Second is we talked about livestock, the low emission livestock. Again, about sustainable land use and given the dietary shifts because of incomes, the demand is only going to go up. And we have programs. The last is agro-logistics in food loss and waste. If food loss and waste was a country, it would be the 3rd highest emitter. And we've seen a lot of that. So clearly there are these very big bankable, I'm okay on time, bankable programs going forward. the last is, in terms of there are these lighthouse farmers and great 15 or 16 examples around the world. There is absolutely no reason why some of this cannot be scaled up. And that is also a big effort that we as a community, as a collective, as a family need to put forward. And CGIAR, my final comment, where the even research that has been happening is very commodity specific. We are now moving into a system story. So doubling of CGIAR resources to really have a very different research profile, I think, is also a big must. Time over, she says. Okay, with that, thank you so much. And if you have any questions, Sam is there.
You can tell why we're lucky to have her, but definitely find her after. Don't ask me those questions. Amazing work and amazing comments and exciting day. And thank you everybody for being here. To close out, is Danush here? Where's Danush? There you are, sir. Okay. Who is the founder and chief climate catalyst for Clim-Eat. Thank you for your leadership. And please close us out.
Yeah, sure. And thanks, Geeta, for that really comprehensive set of remarks to close us with. And thanks to all of you for being here. Like at the New York Climate Week, I was told there's like 400 events. So we've had about 400 people who've been here, prioritize this in competition with others. So thanks for being here. I just wanted to share something in addition to all the great points that was made. I've been working in this food system transformation climate space for the last 10 years or so. And I tried different areas: research, UN, CGIAR, private sector, NGO, and I've been hearing about the need to transform, the need to take action, and so on. So one day I decided, okay, I'm going to step outside and I'm going to create my own organization and I'm going to create change. That's what I did 628 days ago. And what I realized is it's so hard. It's like super hard to do anything. Like opening a bank account, it takes 4 months, Getting a credit card takes 2.5 months, and you get a credit limit of 500 euros, which we just finished already. I cannot get a mortgage because I'm high risk, because I'm director of a startup. Like, it's crazy. So like, if you want to make a change out there, it's not easy. The entire system is not incentivizing people to make changes. Mario said earlier about the innovation system, and we might know what the system needs to look like, but unless it incentivizes people to move and change direction, it's going to be really challenging. So for me personally, like what I've learned is, to create the change, you need change makers. And I'm going to borrow a term I learned from Gabby. It's like, there are people who will try to stop us everywhere. She says stoppers, And whenever I try to do this, okay, I want to have a bank account. Oh, no, you can't. No, you can't. And you go to one person, two person, third person, everybody says you the same thing. And then there will be somebody, who's going to be like, okay, you're trying to make a change out there, I'll help you out. And this is how I do that. And that's what has got us so far to 628 days, is we've found a lot of people who've supported us. And I'm really grateful for that. Many of you in this room have been in that journey. So then what happened was, okay, how do we move forward, And Vita, my colleague, is the one who came up with this name, INNOV-EAT Expedition. So we want to innovate, then we have implement, and impact-eat to deliver impact. But we see this as an expedition, as a journey that's over the next 7 years or so. So what we want is a community of change makers who would sail with us on this expedition. And she's going to she's asked me, I just do whatever she tells me, and that's why I had a great event to wear this hat. So then I've been appointed as the co-captain of this expedition. But it's a co-captain. Like, I would like to invite all of you to be co-captains so that we can go in that journey together. And as I mentioned in the morning, Clim-Eat will close in 2030, so I'll plan to be back here and tell you what we did on this expedition, and I hope to see you all back as well. So we had this idea. So we had the Clim-Eat retreat earlier this year, this INNOV-EAT, Implement, Impact, Eat, and Vita said, eyes on our plate, and there's logo, symbolism, all of this. And immediately was like, how do we go from there? You know, and I just wanted to thank some of those early change makers who came on that process. So it all happened in May at the Aim for Climate Summit. And so we went to Alison Rose. Where is Alison Rose? She's not here. So she's from Columbia University. So she's the person who's been supporting us. And she introduced us to Jess Fancer, who's here now. And that time we were still at Johns Hopkins. We met in DC and we had this idea to do this expedition. And Jess was like, just go for it. Let's do it, you know? And that's change making, you know? That's not a stopper mentality. And it was like, just like, let's go for it, you know? And thanks, Jess, for that support. And we are here, and to Columbia for all the support you have provided in delivering this. Really appreciate it. I don't know if Adrienne is here. I would also like to thank her. Then also in Aim for Climate, then I went to Gabby from Bayer. And Gabby's been supporting Clim-Eat since day zero. And she was also like, yeah, great idea. Let's do it. Let's do it. You know, and that kind of energy is needed. And thanks to you, Gabby, and to Mildred for being with us and all the support that you've provided. So we were trying to recruit these change makers. Then we went to EAT Foundation. Ian is here. Ian? Thank you so much for being here and all the support you have provided. I went to Gunhild, and she was also super excited, and let's do this. And we have some very big plans in the future, so looking forward to that as well. And then Vita came to New York. She came to scout the venue and find partners, and she's like, Dhanush, there is a museum of failures here. We need to bring them in. And they immediately came on board as well, and I would like to thank them as well. And the Bezos Earth Fund, who provided funding for us to do a lot of work, and also for this event. And he was also in the similar sentiment. So I would really like to thank all these change makers who joined us and helped us deliver this. But in addition, and I really want to thank my colleagues, Vita, you are an absolute star. You delivered this whole thing, the whole day. Can you stand up, please? So, the whole day I keep hearing about like how amazing the event was. I can take no credit. She did everything. There's like symbolism, this hat, the logo, the shape of this building, everything's like all on her. You can ask her those questions. There's a lot of thought behind this. And then I would like to thank Leanne. So she's the third staff member of Clim-Eat. She's amazing. So like she's been like leading all our comms efforts and all the crisis management, so that I can actually, there's quite a lot of crises in between that she managed, and so I can do other things. So thank you so much, Leanne. Annabelle, who's here with us, she's our youngest team member, and she's been teaching me Gen Z slang. How many of you is Gen Z? Okay, she taught me. So this event is giving, you know? So thank you so much. For making this a giving event and all this amazing work you put into the platform. And Philip, thanks for coming in the blazer, Philip, and making all the effort. Yeah. No, thank you so much for all the hard work. So Annabelle and Philip have been behind all the content, which is based on the work that Mario has done. So thank you, Mario, for the collaboration, and really looking forward to sailing with you in this journey as well. So yeah, thank you so much. And that's people in this room, but also people who've been beyond. We've had colleagues also supporting us, Tatiana and the team from Empower. So I'd like to thank all of them, because this is live streamed, and I'd like to thank all those who've joined us. So thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.